It is said that it takes a village to raise a child. But when you look at this whole Epstein saga and the now release of the Epstein files, I am sad to say that it shows that it actually takes a village to exploit children and women. And the reason for that is when you study the dynamics that made it possible for Epstein to commit heinous crimes for years and years and get away with it, you can't help but observe that this type of abuse is a group phenomenon. I have been saying for a really long time that we need to stop looking at narcissism and psychopathy through the limited lens of psychology and personality disorders, or good and bad, or good and evil, black and white binaries, because these limited descriptions do not serve us. Narcissism and psychopathy are easily observable phenomenon in your day-to-day life and have been around for thousands of years in the form of exploitative thinking and inhumane values. And if we fail to understand this, it can be easy to see how a crime of this scale, in which not only did this man exploit and torture and grape God knows how many hundreds of women over a period of how many years, and the number of elite leaders, elite men who may have taken part in some form or the other in this exploitation, then I think we need to see why this flew under the radar for so long, and also look at how we as a collective refuse to believe victims, and in fact Darvoed victims when they did come forward. Darvo again is deny, attack, reverse victim offender, and this is a phenomenon which is very clearly observable. When victims come forward, they tend to be vilified and attacked and instead made to feel as if they are the perpetrators rather than the real perpetrators. A couple of years ago, I had made a video about narcissistic clubs that exist in society and how we may not even realize when we are trapped in one of these narcissistic clubs. And in that video, I had referred to specific narcissistic clubs, i.e., narcissistic and psychopathic systems that we all may end up being a part of in some form or the other and be trapped by and not even realize it. And they include toxic governance, toxic welfare systems, toxic family systems, toxic boys' clubs, toxic institutions, and even a very toxic legal system, which often does not give any chance for victims to gain a sense of justice. If you look at the fact that most of Epstein's victims were either poor or or were already victims of earlier abuse, you will notice that they were targeted specifically for this reason, because it made them more easy to exploit and made this vulnerability very easy to abuse. The other thing is that if you look at the fact that there were many members of society who came across these trafficked victims and were aware of exactly what was happening and did nothing. I had seen this interview with one of the Epstein survivors, Virginia Jeffrey, and she had talked about how, while she and the other girls were being trafficked, they had come across hordes of people, including stylists, doctors, restaurant and hotel staff, and these people did nothing, even though they knew exactly what was going on. And I would try to understand that the reason they would do nothing is either they were indifferent, or they were evil themselves and didn't care, or they were terrified that if they did try to do something or complain even to the authorities, they may be, and their families may be targeted themselves. And I think somewhere deep inside they were terrified that these very systems, especially the legal system, would not support them. Because somewhere we all know that these systems fail us. In fact, the legal system failed these vulnerable women and children, and is failing them even now. The manner in which the files have been released, where millions of files with millions of bits and pieces of data have just been dumped for the public to make sense out of them, and it's very difficult to have any kind of coherent narrative coming through from them, is evidence of how indifferent the system is to the suffering of these victims and to future victims that will inevitably occur if the system doesn't change. And we need to ask ourselves why, as a society, why, as a collective, we are so blind to these systems that collectively fail us and continue to exploit us. Why is it that we allow the most vulnerable members of our societies to be targeted, whether it is the non-verbal, whether it is the poor, the disenfranchised, the fallen? These are the very people that are targeted for these kinds of abuse and crimes. Vulnerability is what makes us human, and I think we need to ask ourselves as a society why we shame and ridicule and then feel the need to target vulnerability instead of respecting it and protecting it.